So this is one of those issues that can get pretty touchy and people can become passionate about, because some people feel that we should and the other people feel that we should not, and therefore we can get into a big political discussion as to, have we gone into Iraq and are we still supposed to be in Afghanistan all these years later after 9/11 and so on. So people can get pretty touchy on this issue. And I don't want to do that, obviously. By the time this is all said and done, I want us to have a good understanding of how we can be a little more like Jesus. So even though this is a topic on war and what does the Bible have to say about it and history and so on, but we are going to finish by looking at what the attitude of Jesus, our Savior, is on all of these issues. And hopefully that will be a good spiritual lesson. There is a concept, there is something that is called a concept of the just war or just wars. And this is, there are people who say no war is just and we should never fight wars and innocent people die. But there are those who say there are such thing as a just war. For example, one of the wars that we could say was just was World War II, when you had a situation where a crazy person decided to kill Jews and gypsies and minorities and everybody who was not German, and then Hitler actually developed a system, put a system in place that categorized people according to their race. So Germans were up on top, and then the Scandinavians, and then the British, and then the Southern Slavs, and then all of the other races. And he had a plan for all of these people. Jews, gypsies, we're going to exterminate them because they are a problem for the world. So we're just going to kill them right off. Slavs, Russians, and my people, Serbs, Croatians, they're going to be the workers. They're going to do all the work in the factories and so on. And then the people on top, the Germans, they're going to do the arts and they're going to do the fancy jobs and they'll rule everybody else. So he tried to impose that on Europe, and obviously in my country everybody rebelled, and obviously British Empire started fighting Germans and France and the United States, and that was a just war because he was doing something that was unjust. Now there are other wars that we could say were not just. So what is a just war? There are two concepts here: right to go to war in the first place, and then the right conduct during that war. So what does give you the right to go to war? This is an issue. Can you just go in Vietnam? The government, American government, told us we needed to go to Vietnam to stop the expansion of the communism. Was that the right reason? And then you're going to have people argue for, and you're going to have people argue against it. We were not attacked by Vietnamese, but we were attacked by Germans, you see, in Europe and many other places. So number one issue is, do we have the right to go to war? Number two, right conduct. Once the war starts, who can you kill? Do you kill everybody? Or do you just kill soldiers? What about women, children, innocent people, and so on? So these are the issues. In the pre-Christian times, we have the record going as far as the Indian Hindus, and they have an epic or a story in which we have the record of one of the first written discussions about what is a just war. And they established this criteria that they called proportionality. In other words, proportion. And proportionality was something that guided the wars that they conducted. So, for example, they had, I listed a few criteria for you. They are interesting. Chariots could not attack cavalry. In other words, if you were on a chariot, you were not allowed to attack a soldier who was on foot. Chariots could only fight against other chariots. So they started creating rules that would create a little bit of fairness in warfare. You see, you were not allowed to attack people in distress. So if somebody was on the battlefield and they had their leg chopped off and they were just lying there, you were not allowed to attack them. You see, they were in distress, so they were not a fair game. So you had these rules. Just means, in other words, you were not allowed to have poisoned or barbed arrows. what some of these nations would do, they would put poison on top of the arrow, then they would shoot it. And maybe they wouldn't kill a person right away. Maybe the arrow would strike them into their leg. But because of the poison, they would suffer tremendously before they would die. So that was not allowed. Barb, they would put the hook on the end of the arrow, so when it would pierce you, if you tried to pull it out, it would pull out all of your guts and whatever was inside of you. So this was not allowed. Just means. Just cause meant that you were not allowed to attack somebody if you were enraged. You had to be calm. You couldn't just jump on somebody because you were enraged and you had rage in your heart. And then fair treatment of captives and the wounded. So this is at Hindu times. This is way, way, way before Moses and way before the Bible. Roman Empire also predates Christianity. If you remember, Jesus was born in the time of the Roman Empire. So Roman empires also had the rules about the war. Just cause. For war might include the necessity of repelling an invasion. So they would go to war if there was invasion. Or retaliation for pillaging or breach of a treaty. So these were the rules that guided the Roman Empire as they entered into the wars. Now this is all pre-Christianity. What the Romans and the Hindus and many other nations had in common was this one other thing. Before they went to war, they had to get the permission from their gods. So they would, in the Roman Empire, they would go into the temples and they would have these elaborate rituals, and the priests would then pronounce whether or not the gods have allowed them to go into the war or not. And many nations have this same rule, that before you go to war and you start killing people, you have to get a permission from gods. And that leads us to the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, basically all warfare that is recorded between the Israelites and other nations had to be approved by God. God had to say you could go. And you know, God told the Israelites that they could possess the land, the promised land. The problem was there was already people living in those lands. And most of those nations, they were living the lives where they worshipped pagan idols, and they sacrificed their children to pagan gods. And basically it was a form of demonic worship. So God has decided to destroy those nations, to punish them by destruction, just like Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed. You remember when Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed, there was kids in there and women and babies and so on. And it was a punishment like flood. At the time of the flood, everybody was wiped out, you see. So these nations, God had decided that they needed to be conquered, and this was now in the Old Testament a war of conquest, a war for the territory. It was not because they were attacked. It was not because the treaty was breached. This was strictly, we are going in to take over that land, that country. And so now, in the Old Testament, in Deuteronomy chapter 20, I'm just using that one example to illustrate how this worked. When you draw near the city to fight against it, offer terms of peace to it. So, number one, there was a distinction between the cities that were far away and the cities that were close to the territory of the Israelites. So the first part of this passage is talking about the cities that are far away. So when the Israel's army came to that city with all of the equipment and they were ready to conquer it, they were supposed to offer terms of peace to that city, first of all. And if it responds to you peaceably and opens it up to you, then all the people who are found in it shall do forced labor for you and shall serve you. So this was a war of conquest. Israelites were supposed to come up to that city and they were supposed to let them know, we are here to fight you and your option is to surrender. And if you surrender, basically the way it worked, if you surrender, we leave you alone, you do your thing, at the end of the year we come over and you pay us taxes. You pay us tariffs. You pay us what we want. They could set the terms of what this subdued nation will have to pay them, you see. And you remember Israel had to pay taxes to other nations that conquered them, you see. So this was one of the ways that they could just live better and have extra money, because they put these people into subservient role, and they had to work basically for the nation of Israel. But if it makes no peace with you, but makes war against you, then you shall besiege it, and when the Lord your God gives it into your hand, you shall put all its males to the sword. In other words, all men you have the right to kill. But the women and the little ones, the livestock and everything else in the city, all its spoils you shall take as plunder for yourselves, and you shall enjoy the spoil of your enemies, which the Lord your God has given you. So many times this is what would happen. They would go to a city. That city felt that they could repel the attack, so they did not want to be subservient, and then there was a war and one side would win. One other thing that would also happen is many times the city would say, okay, we give up, we're going to pay you taxes, and we're going to pay you duties, we're going to be your servants and your slaves. And then the Israelite army would pull back to their own territory in this city. For a while they would pay taxes, but then they would try to find other cities that would come to their aid, and sooner or later there was a rebellion, and there was really a perpetual war going on between Israel and all of these nations to this day. To this day. I want you to notice something. None of those people were ever exterminated completely. You read the Bible and God says, to them, when you go there, kill everybody. But none of these people were exterminated. Most of them, their descendants, are still alive to this day. And God left them there many times, not because He left them there because He wanted those nations to test the faith of Israel and their obedience. And many times Israel just failed and began to follow those other gods of those other nations. And to this day, we have a major problem down in the Middle East because of this. So this was the rule that applied to the cities that were in the distance. But the cities, this you shall do to all the cities that are very far from you, which are not the cities of the nations here, but in the cities of these people, close to you, close to your territory, that the Lord God is giving you for an inheritance, you shall save alive nothing that breathes. And this is, I told you at the beginning, these are hard texts. Because as Christians, we believe in God, we believe in justice, we believe in mercy, we believe in God gives a chance to everybody, and then here in the Old Testament, you're reading a text that says, don't leave anything alive, devote them to complete destruction. And then it names all of these nations, Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Jebusites, as the Lord your God has commanded you, kill everybody. Why? That they may not teach you to do according to all their abominable practices. In other words, God says, I have decided to destroy these peoples because they are teaching you to follow demons and to follow false gods and to do what is wrong in my sight. So Israelites were given a permission to kill everybody that was in that imminent area where they were living. That leads us, now we're looking through history at different reasons for war. So in Hindus and Romans, they had their rules. But here now you have the rule where you can go to war to actually win over the territory for yourself. You're allowed to take that territory for yourself. And I think it's important for us to understand that as we are looking at our country, United States of America, you see, and the relationship that we have to wars and how we look at ourselves. Oftentimes we look at ourselves as we are the special country, right? We are the light to the world. We are the light on the hill, and we are supposed to promote democracy. And what are we doing by saying all of these things? Basically, we are making a case for a just war. We have the right now to go to this country and fix them, and then we have a right to go to that country and fix them. This is now a real conversation that we are having, and I'm just being honest, about this. And some of you may find this disturbing. and may not even agree with me. But that's okay. I think it's important for us to understand how the Bible works and how we have evolved as people. And not just America, but many other countries. You know, every country, when they go to war, they believe that they are in the right. When we went to Vietnam in the 50s and 60s, everybody in America was taught that this was the right and just war because we were going to destroy the communism. Well, how do you think everybody in Vietnam felt? They felt that they were in the just war because they had to defend their land against these people that are coming over from 10,000 miles away. So everybody in every war, when Russians invaded Afghanistan, they felt that they were in the right. But Afghanistanis, they felt that they were in the right. When you look at Israel and Palestine, when you look at Protestant and Catholic in Ireland, anywhere you look, everybody is always going to say, my side is right. I am on the right side of the war, you see. And this is why we have a situation that we have today, because people look at this history and they start applying the wrong lessons and the wrong rights to themselves. St. Augustine, he asserted peacefulness in the face of a grave wrong that could only be stopped by violence would be a sin. So St. Augustine, defense of oneself or others could be a necessity, especially when authorized by a legitimate authority. So St. Augustine, a Christian, is beginning to develop this doctrine and this idea that the government obviously is installed by God, and therefore if the government, the legitimate authority says that we need to go to war, then it's all right. And a lot of people believe this to this day. If the government, because the Bible says God installs, the kings, and we have to be obedient to the kings, and we have to pray to the authority and all of that stuff. So if they say we got to go to war, then we go to war. And we don't question it. And it's okay, because it's God ordained. You see. They who have waged war in obedience to the divine command. Isn't this interesting? Hindus had to get a permission from their gods. Romans had to get a permission from their gods. Jews had to get a permission from God. And now in the times of Christianity, they who have waged war in obedience to the divine command or in conformity with his laws have represented in their persons the public justice or the wisdom of government, and in this capacity have put to death wicked men. Such persons have by no means violated the commandment, thou shalt not kill. So obviously, in our society, we have capital punishment. Is it the murder or is it the killing? What is it? And to be honest, there are times when I feel like if I could have an opportunity to push the button, I would on some of these people, or pull the lever. When I hear what they have done, when I hear how they have murdered an innocent child, or raped somebody, a little boy or a little girl, and dismembered. And I don't want to go into gory details. This is a church. You can go online and you can see all kinds of stuff. But you see some of that stuff, and obviously, of course, we are all going to say just fry them, just fry them. And I'm not necessarily talking about it. I'm not talking about the justice here. I'm not talking about the rule of law. I'm not talking about the capital punishment. I don't want to argue that here in this church. That's not the sermon that I want to preach, whether it's right or wrong. I'm just saying how sometimes I feel. We all feel that way because we have a sense of justice. Even those people who are absolutely against the capital punishment sometimes feel that this person deserves to die because of what they've done. And I understand the argument against the capital punishment. The most powerful argument is that so many innocent people are put to death because of the mistakes in the judicial process and in the justice system. And that's a fact as well. So that's something that the society and the government and the politicians and our representatives have to weigh and make a decision on that. I don't want to make a moral decision on that here in this sermon, but that's something that has to be taken into consideration as well. Catholic Church, 1.5 billion Catholics in the world, has tremendous influence on the politics of many of the countries, and they came up with 4 rules about the just war, and here they are. I just want to share them real quick. The damage inflicted by the aggressor on the nation or community of nations must be lasting, grave, and certain. So, if the damage that this nation is going to inflict on a community of nations will be lasting, grave, and certain, then we have the right to defy them. And this is a classic example of Hitler in World War II. Hitler was going to just do a damage that was going to be lasting and permanent. He was going to change the world according to his ideas. So the Catholic Church would have said, it's a just war to go and fight these people. And it's okay to kill them, and it's okay to, destroy them, whatever you want to call them. All other means of putting an end to it must have shown to be impractical or ineffective. In other words, when there is about to be a war, there needs to be a negotiated attempt to negotiate peace. And if you can't, if there is absolutely no way of negotiating this, then what do you do? And I want us to think about this on a personal level. If you get in trouble with somebody at work or in your neighborhood or in your household, as normal and Christian people, peaceful people who like to live the way Jesus told us to live, we're going to try to negotiate some kind of a resolution, right? We're not going to go and just jump on somebody and try and fight them. We're going to try to understand why are they angry and see if we can fix it before the whole thing explodes. And I want you to think about this, I gave an example this morning when I preached this sermon. When I lived in Wyoming, I had 2 dogs, a Cocker Spaniel and a Rottweiler. The Rottweiler was big and black and just nasty looking dog, And Cocker Spaniel was small and he had this beautiful white color, and they were beautiful dogs, both of them, but they just barked constantly, And one day, and I never paid any attention to it. When your dog barks, it never bothers you, right? It only bothers you when your neighbor's dog barks, right? That's how it works. I heard the guy who one time says, my neighbor's dog barks so much, I decided to go buy him, and I bought him off of him, and he still barks so much, but now he doesn't bother me because he's mine. That's one way of solving that problem. But this lady that lived next door, she came over, and I could see that she didn't sleep in days, And she says, Gordon, I need to talk to you. And I could see that she needed to talk to me. She says, your dogs, they just keep on barking. You'd think you could, at night at least, you could put them inside of the house, And I was really surprised and taken aback. I didn't realize that I have hurt my neighbors in this way, And I said, of course, not the problem. I'll be happy to do that. And from that point on, that's what I did. When the nighttime sun came down, I took the dogs inside, and they actually enjoyed it even better. And my neighbors were okay with it. We negotiated a situation. I didn't come to her and say, get the hell off of my property, and who are you to tell me, I didn't do that. That's not what we do as Christian people, right? We try to negotiate things. Somebody cuts you off, you can flip them off, or you can, slow down, step on the brake, let them go away so you have your own peace. Somebody does something to you at work, they make a stupid comment or something, they want to provoke you, you can fight back, or you can negotiate the same way Jesus would and just stay away from them. Let them do their thing, You don't need to get into it with them. That's my point here, you see. Negotiated peace. We need to do more of that in our lives as Christians. There must be serious prospect of success. If you're going to go to war, you can't just have a perpetual war. You can't fight with your neighbors all your life. You had to find a resolution. The use of arms must not produce evils and disorders graver than the evil to be eliminated. This is a problem today that we have today with nuclear weapons, with chemical weapons, because a lot of innocent people get hurt. Do you see how we have devolved from the Hindu times to today? Today it's okay, people use chemical weapons. We put irradiated tips on our bullets. So when they hit somebody, even if they don't kill them, the radiation will kill them. And this is all now legal anymore in the world. Every country does it, not just us. Everybody does it, you see. Everybody fights dirty wars. There is no more just wars. There is only dirty wars anymore. When you look today at the main reasons for war that are taking place in the 20th and 21st century, you will see the list of 8 reasons. And they are, number 1, economic gain. Economic gain. My personal opinion, I don't want to offend anybody, but I'm going to say it anyways. My personal opinion, for example, was that when we went to Iraq, that was a war for economic gain. Because it was going to take Iraq out of the oil production, and Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, they were going to make a ton of money because the price of oil was going to go up, and so were all of the big oil companies. And you remember, the price of oil just shot up. They made millions, and about 2 million people died in Iraq for no reason. And by the way, those people had nothing to do with 9/11. It was in Afghanistan. And by the way, we are still at war in Afghanistan, and we are still at war in Yemen, and we still have soldiers everywhere. Now they tell us that we are in this perpetual war against terror. And what is terror? What is terrorism? Whatever the party in power tells us it is. If they are Democrats or Republicans, they'll tell us which country is creating terror, and therefore we have to go there and spend our resources and money and whatever. I believe a lot of this stuff is just for money. Somebody's making a ton of money off of it. Economic gain, territorial gain, religion, nationalism, revenge, civil war, revolutionary war, defensive war is the last on the list. We had a revolutionary war in the United States. Obviously, we had a civil war in the United States. Defensive war, obviously, I believe it was World War II when we defended this country and the world, really. And had it not been for the United States of America, the world today, I believe, would still be under the Nazi occupation and power. So, as a country, we have done some really tremendous things to save the whole planet from this evil. But then at the same time, we turned around and did things in other areas that were not so great. But you know what? Just about everybody does that. When you look, before I go to Jesus, I want to say this yet. We talked about Israelites and how they were allowed to destroy all of these nations. At the same time period that Israelites lived, you also have the Assyrian Empire. And you also had the Babylonian Empire. And the history records and tells us that these empires and these armies did such atrocities, tremendous atrocities, that are unspeakable. They brag and they write books. In the Bible, we have this, what we just read is pretty gory, right? You can go in and kill all the men, women, children, everybody else. But in their systems, in the systems of these other nations, they would go in, and once they would conquer the army, they would skin everybody alive. They would burn some, they would put some on crosses, they would stick some on top of the sticks. I mean, the torture was just unbelievable. They would cut people limb to limb, and in great detail they would describe all of these processes in their literature and in the history of their peoples. So the atrocities and the violence, I just want you to understand the scope of this. The atrocities and the violence that has happened on this planet since we fell into sin. Cain kills his brother with a rock, piece of rock. Kills him by bashing his head in. And it only gets worse after that, to this day. Any war is a horrible thing. Because so many innocent people are going to die. And as far as wars go, I want to tell you, as Christians, we shouldn't be too fast to jump on the wagon of any party. Whenever they tell us this is for our good, and question everything. Question everything and be skeptical of everything, and always ask yourself a question: who's going to make money off of this? When it comes to wars. When it comes to our personal behavior, and when it comes to violence in our lives, we go to Jesus, to Matthew chapter 5. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But what does Jesus say? What does Jesus say? You know what I'm going to ask you at the end of this sermon? Who are we going to follow? Are we going to follow Jesus, or are we going to follow the rules of the society and the world in which we live? The rules of this world are, if somebody hits you, you hit them back. If you want to survive in this world, that's how it is. Somebody hits you, you got to hit them back. Somebody attacks you, you got to attack them back. And that's accepted in this world. It's not accepted here in this room. We are Christian. But most of the world operates on that system. If you go and punch somebody out, don't be surprised if they punch you back. Right? So Jesus says, but I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. But if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if anyone would sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who begs from you. Do not refuse the one who would borrow from you. You have heard that it was said, you should love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. I can only give you my opinion on this. There are some people who are going to take this text and they're going to say, this is a text that says we should all be pacifists. And in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, we have a rule that we are pacifists. We don't carry a gun. We don't go into the war. We don't kill anybody. We will serve as medics and as doctors and as nurses and so on. But that's the extent. We are not, in the Adventist Church, we teach that we should not go out there and kill people. That's what Jesus says. He says, love your enemies. Turn the other cheek. If they want to take your shirt, somebody stops you on a street and they want to rob you. This poor lady got robbed here in Westminster a year or so ago. She was in a parking lot of Barnes & Noble. And the guy walked up to her, and she just went to the bank prior to that and took out $1,500 for something. Retired, 80 years old. And the guy walked up and put the gun into her face and grabbed the wallet, grabbed her purse that was on a seat next to her, and took off with it. Somebody attacks you like that, what do? Is it worth it if you kill them? If you have a gun and kill them? I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just asking you to think about this issue. I mentioned, you're a father and you're in your house at night, 2 o'clock in the morning, and you hear noise and you get up and you go to your daughter's bedroom, 10 years old. There's, by the way, a true case. And some crazy guy has crawled in through the window and is raping your 10-year-old. What do? You turn the other cheek? You probably shoot him, right? Or strangle him or something. I'm not sure that's what Jesus was talking about here. Somebody is attacking your little girl, or if somebody is attacking your wife, or if somebody is attacking your husband. Husbands can be attacked too. My friend was attacked, a man, surgeon. Something went bad with the surgery, and the man came out. The man's child died in a surgery. So he came after the surgeon. He started beating the snot out of him. And his wife thought that this guy was going to kill her husband. So she grabbed a chair and she hit this guy over the head. And he then pulled back and ran away and left them alone. A man can be attacked. A husband. Do you just sit there? I don't think that's what Jesus was talking about. This is my opinion, you know. I think Jesus, God would want us to protect the little ones. Even your own life. But I also think that what Jesus was saying, somebody calls you a name at work, somebody puts you down, somebody hurts your feelings and offends you, and somebody tries to humiliate you in some way. I think what Jesus was saying, you know what? Just walk away. Just walk away. You don't need that. You don't need to escalate that situation. Somebody flips you off and slams on the brakes in front of you. Just walk away. Slow down. Let them go. You don't need that nonsense in your life. Work, neighbors, family, ball games. People go out there and take their kids to play softball. And then next thing you know, the parents are on top of each other trying to kill each other because of that. Why? This is not what we do as Christians. So I think there is a common sense element that we need to apply here in this situation. Jesus wants us to be a special kind of people. He wants us to be like Him. He wants us to love people and to realize that even though they may get angry and say hurtful things to us and may even offend us in some way, that God still loves them. And God still wants the best for them. And oftentimes, you will be able to negotiate the situation. And if you are relaxed, and if you're calm, by the way, don't look at me. I'm not a good example of that. Don't do as I do. Do as I say. But I'm trying. But you know, if you're calm, and I'm doing better. If you're calm, it just takes the fuel off of that fire. It just sucks out the oxygen from that explosive situation if you're calm. But if you start getting agitated, then the next thing you know, you could end up in a fist fight or a knife fight or a gun fight or who knows what. And you don't need that. I think that's what Jesus was talking about. And I want to tell you why Jesus was saying this. Jesus was not saying this because he was this guy who was everything was going to be idealistic for him and perfect world and roses over here and, you know, just everything is nice. That's not why Jesus was saying this. He was saying it for another reason, and I want you to understand this. I'm going to leave you with this. He was talking to the teachers of the law, and this is what he said to them at one point when he got mad at them. He said to them, this is in John chapter 8, "You are of your father the devil, and your will is to do your father's desires." And look at this next statement. "He was a murderer from the beginning." When Cain lifted that rock to kill his brother, that came from Satan. Murder and violence emanate from Satan. And what Jesus is trying to teach us, that on a personal level, as Christians, as His followers, we should not engage in violence of any sort because the source of that is from Satan, not from God. And when you allow violence in your heart, you get up at 2 a.m. and somebody is trying to hurt your child. You defend them. You're not violent. But if somebody calls you a name at work and you cuss them out, yes, you are. What's your attitude? What's your attitude? What's my attitude in these situations? If you're defending yourself, is it because of the violence or because somebody needs help? But when you start getting in it with people over all kinds of issues because your heart is not converted and because you don't have Jesus in your heart, you're allowing Satan to guide your actions and to direct how you're going to act. That's where we cross the line, and this is what Jesus was talking about. Who is our Father? We need to use common sense, obviously, in all of these situations, but in the end, who is my Father? Who do I follow? Do I follow Jesus? Do I follow the ways of nonviolence? As best as I can, have peace with all people. Seek peace with all people. Make peace with all people. Make peace even with your enemies for the sakes of the gospel so that you can preach the gospel. Yeah, you're going to have confrontations. Yeah, you're going to have situations where you're going to have to stand your ground. I agree with that totally. But what's in your heart? Is it violence or is it peace? You standing up with Jesus? Or are you just angry because we have allowed Satan to manipulate us and manipulate our emotions and control us? And this, I think, is the difference. And I don't know if I even came close to explaining this properly, but I hope that I gave you something to think about. Okay, thank you. That's all I needed. I'm going to get off the stage now. Amen.